My wife said she loved me, then asked to sleep with someone else.
I always thought my wife and I had talked about everything that mattered. We'd been married for 6 years and our lives had settled into a quiet, comfortable rhythm. It was a rhythm I cherished, a predictable beat that felt like home. But one night after dinner, she asked if we could talk, and the way she said it made my stomach tighten instantly. Something was wrong. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, the one we'd picked out together, her hands folded neatly on the surface. Her eyes, usually so full of light, were clouded with nervousness. Then she said it. She said she felt like she had missed out on life. I tried to understand, so I asked her what she meant. She hesitated, looking down at her hands, and then her words landed like a blow. She had very little experience before me. I tried to smile, to lighten the mood, thinking it was just a moment of insecurity, something we could talk through and laugh about later. But then she kept going. She said she wanted to know what it felt like to be with someone else. I actually laughed at first, a short, sharp sound in the quiet room. I was so sure she was joking, setting up some punchline. But she didn't laugh back. Her face was serious, etched with a kind of desperate sincerity. She rushed to reassure me, saying she loved me, that she wasn't planning on leaving. She just wanted to know, just once. Suddenly, the room felt smaller, the air thick and hard to breathe. The predictability I'd found so comforting now felt like a cage I hadn't realized we were in. I had to ask, even though I was terrified of the answer. "Are you already thinking about someone specific?" She said no, but the tiny pause before she answered felt like an eternity. It said more than her words ever could. I told her marriage wasn't a trial period, that it wasn't something you could just pause to try something new. Her response cut deep. She said she felt trapped by the idea of forever. My own heart seized up. "Does forever with me scare you?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Her answer shattered me more than any angry outburst could have. "I don't know." That "I don't know" was a wound that I knew would fester. We talked until midnight, or maybe it was later. Time blurred as we went around in circles, a dizzying carousel of hurt and confusion. She cried, tears streaming down her face as she said she didn't want to resent me later in life, to wonder, what if? I tried to hold my ground, telling her that resentment, no matter how strong, doesn't justify betrayal. Then she dropped another bombshell. "Would you ever consider an open marriage?" I said no without a single moment of hesitation. There was no room for debate on that. She just nodded, as if that was the answer she expected all along. The next few days were a masterclass in polite tension. We moved around each other like strangers in our own home. The comfortable silence we once shared was now filled with unspoken words and heavy thoughts. She started texting me from the other room instead of just walking over to talk. And I noticed her phone, once left casually on the counter, was now guarded more closely than a state secret. One evening I couldn't take the suspense anymore. I had to know, "Have you already crossed the line?" I asked, bracing myself. She swore she hadn't, her eyes wide and pleading. I told her, my voice raw, "I need honesty more than I need comfort right now." She insisted she was just confused, not cruel. But I knew that confusion can be just as destructive as cruelty. It can still burn everything to the ground. That night, sleep was a distant dream. I lay in our bed, the space between us feeling like a canyon. And my mind played out the most horrific scenarios. I imagined her with someone else, laughing with him, touching him. The thought made me physically sick. I knew something had to change. In the morning, with the first light of dawn, I told her, "I can't live like this." The fear in her eyes was immediate. "Are you threatening to leave me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "No," I said, "I'm protecting myself." That seemed to finally stop her in her tracks. She went quiet after that, a deep, contemplative silence that was different from the tense avoidance of the past few days. 2 days later, the confession came. She told me she had been talking to a guy from her work. She rushed to add that it wasn't physical, that they had just talked. But my question was simple. Why did it need to exist at all? Her answer was a gut punch. "He listened to me," she said. I stared at her, dumbfounded. "I'm right here," I reminded her, the words feeling hollow even as I said them. "I've always been right here." She finally broke down, admitting she knew she'd messed up. But I had to make her understand the gravity of it. Wanting someone else, even just talking to them in that way, that was a choice you made, I told her. She begged me not to walk away, her hands clutching at my arm. I looked down at her, and the fight just went out of me. "I'm not walking yet," I said softly, "but I'm close to the door." It was in that moment of raw, painful honesty that we finally agreed to counseling. Our first sessions were brutal. In the sterile, quiet room of the therapist's office, she admitted her deep-seated fear of growing old without ever truly knowing herself outside of our relationship. And I admitted my own deepest fear, the fear of being replaced, of not being enough. In that room, neither of our fears felt small or irrational. They were real, and they were tearing us apart. The weeks that followed were a painful mix of hard conversations and long, heavy silences. She stopped talking to her coworker completely. I wish I could say I felt a wave of relief, but all I felt was caution. The damage was done, and I was wary of every move, every word. The trust was gone, and I didn't know if it could ever be rebuilt. One night, as we were getting ready for bed, she turned to me and asked, her voice small, "Do you still want me?" I thought about it for a long moment, and the truth came out. "I want the version of us that felt safe," I told her. Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. "I want that too," she whispered. Trust didn't just magically reappear overnight. It wasn't a switch we could flip. But what did show up every single day was effort. She started being radically honest, sharing her feelings and fears even when it was uncomfortable and messy. And I learned to be more vocal about my own needs and insecurities instead of shutting down and letting resentment build. We learned together that curiosity, when it's not bound by respect and commitment, is a dangerous, destructive force. Months later, she told me she no longer felt that urge, that gnawing need to know what else was out there. I looked at her and said, "Urges matter less than choices." We had a choice. We could have chosen distance, bitterness, and eventually separation. Instead, we chose counseling again. We chose to face the ugly truths instead of hiding in pretty fantasies. Our marriage didn't become perfect. It didn't transform back into the comfortable, easy rhythm it once was. It became something else. It became real. It was forged in fire, tested by doubt, and slowly, painstakingly put back together. Sometimes love survives not because no one ever falters or feels a moment of weakness. It survives because, when standing at a crossroads, someone makes the choice not to cross the line. They choose to turn around and walk back home.